You know, one of the things we are doing in this MOOC is to see how images can drive our understanding of the past. Our topic today is how photography colonized the Philippines. And it's Chris that brought that concept to us and brought this whole notion of using the Worcester collection to Ellen and me when we were doing Visualizing Cultures. What we're dealing with here is a new concept that we can come back to many times now, which is the colonial gaze, and how photography doesn't just show us power in action like we saw in doing the conquest of the Philippines, but photography itself is powerful. Tell us how, as a historian, you came to these perceptions and what it means to you. You know, you and I are both historians. We deal with text, written text. That's the way we were trained. But the images do something different. What does this mean, this colonial gaze and power in photography?
Right. So I think it's important when we think about power to expand that definition beyond military power to consider the questions of culture. And when we look at cultural exchange and negotiation between Americans and Filipinos, you have to think about how that's also a relationship of power, of the colonizer and the colonized. And photography plays a key role in that relationship of power. That in taking a picture, the photographer frames a view, looks and snaps an image. But that's also a way in which the photographer is carrying into that moment his or her own sense of the culture that they're looking at, their own sense of what they're doing, in this case in the Philippines. And we can really see that in Worcester's collection. This is an enormous collection of photographs taken, some of them by Worcester himself, collected by him from other photographers over the course of 2 decades. And for historians, this is one of the most important sets of materials we have to understand the history of the Philippines between the 1890s and the 1910s. There are enormous numbers of written records, written by colonial officials and American visitors and army officers, and they tell us a great deal. And there are plenty of written records as well by Filipinos, members of the Revolutionary Army who challenged the Americans, ordinary Filipinos who were sort of writing for newspapers or recording their views in government documents. What is missing, if you don't have the Worcester collection, is that sense of the humanity of this exchange. And the photographs document the landscapes, they document the people, but they are not, as we're going to see over the course of this module, they're not purely objective, innocent photographs. They don't just tell one story. So as we look at these photographs, we'll ask questions about the stories they tell, and think about what they can tell us, and then what they can't tell us as well.